You wake up to the sound of a rooster that sounds like it's been smoking pipeweed since birth. Its crowing isn't exactly majestic, it's more like a dramatic throat clear from someone about to recite a family curse. But it works. You're awake. Your back aches. Not from last night's dreams, which you don't remember, but from the uneven straw mattress beneath you. It's not just straw, someone clearly snuck in some twigs. Possibly out of malice, possibly out of economy, possibly both. A lump digs into your ribs. You decide to stop moving altogether. That feels safer. The ceiling above you is a thatched roof, bundles of reed, layered like the world's most desperate lasagna, blackened in spots by years of smoke from the hearth fire. A small spider dangles overhead, swaying softly in a breeze you can't feel. Outside, you hear the world stretching itself awake. A cow groans like someone regretting last night's soaked binge. A child laughs, possibly while chasing a chicken, possibly while becoming a chicken. It's hard to tell from here. You're still not quite sure if this is a dream or a full-time commitment. Welcome to your new life in a medieval English village. Roughly the year 1320, give or take a plague or two. A friendly warning, you probably won't make it through this day. Before we get too deep into it, consider gently liking this video if your blanket's already warm. And if your feet are tucked in just right, maybe subscribe for more sleepy historical side quests. We're quietly curious here. And let us know in the comments, what's your location, and what's the time on your side of the sun? We're always curious who else is listening from other centuries of sleep. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. No rush, no sharp corners. You sit up slowly. Or try to. The ceiling seems closer than it should be. Your head brushes against a wooden beam that has absolutely no plans to move for you. Outside the shutterless window, a glorified hole with ambition, the light is soft and pale. Early dawn. Mist clings to the fields like it overslept. You're in a one-room cottage. Packed dirt floor. A hearth made of stones blackened by fire and time. In the corner, a three-legged stool tries to look stable. A heavy wooden door guards the entrance, and beside it, a small iron hook cradles a ladle carved from something that might have once been a tree branch, or a toe. Hard to say. Either way, it's kitchenware now. You reach down to splash your face with water from a wooden bucket. The water is cold. Not brisk. Not refreshing. Cold like there's probably a frog in here somewhere cold. Still, you splash. You notice the smell. A blend of smoke, wool, wet earth, and something that can only be described as regretful turnips. It's not terrible. Just persistent. Your clothes are coarse linen, scratchy and stubborn. A tunic that hangs like it's disappointed in you, and hose that feel like they were designed during a minor act of vengeance. You find a rough wool cloak nearby, likely yours, and throw it over your shoulders like someone trying not to catch 14th century pneumonia. You will likely fail. This is your home now, and you are a peasant. Or villager, If you want the softer marketing version, your job isn't entirely clear yet. Maybe you thatch roofs. Maybe you brew ale. Maybe you specialize in the noble art of not dying during a cold snap. You step outside. The door creaks like it's never been asked politely before. The air greets you with the gentle slap of damp grass and chimney smoke. Your breath puffs out in clouds. Birds flutter somewhere overhead, probably plotting something. You stand at the edge of the village green, where the grass is worn thin from bare feet, hooves, and various indecisions. Around you, a scatter of timber-framed houses, some leaning slightly, others standing stiff with the kind of pride only mildew can produce. The village isn't big, maybe 20 homes at most, ringed by woods, with narrow dirt paths threading between buildings, like someone once dropped a bowl of noodles and called it urban planning. You hear the distant clink of a blacksmith's hammer. Someone's already up and working. Of course they are. The day doesn't wait for your medieval confusion. But there's one person you're meant to meet today, and it's not the blacksmith. It's old Mags. She's the village herbalist. Which is to say, she knows plants, occasionally talks to them, and is half-joked to be a witch, depending on the season and the level of crop failure. Her cottage is the one with herbs hanging like laundry and bones nailed to the lintel, mostly animal, probably. But before we head there, you might want breakfast. If you're lucky, you'll get a crust of rye bread and maybe some soft cheese, depending on whether the goats cooperated this week. If not, there's always thin gruel, also known as hot sadness. One major fact before you chew anything: in 1320, England is in the middle of the High Middle Ages. Population's booming, towns are growing, and the church owns more land than it knows what to do with. You, however, own exactly one spoon, which someone else may currently be borrowing. Historians still debate whether peasants had a standard work week or more seasonal rhythms. Either way, your schedule is less about meetings and more about mud. Now, take a breath. Feel the chill in your lungs. Smell the burning peat. Hear the gentle bickering of neighbors over who stole whose chicken last solstice. Welcome to day one. You walk the path toward the village center, where a few stalls are already half assembled. Wooden carts, rough spawn awnings, sacks of grain, and one surprisingly sassy goose tied to a fence post. It hisses as you pass, but you maintain eye contact. That's how you win. Today is market day, which means several things: a vague sense of excitement, someone will drop a turnip dramatically, and prices will be simultaneously too high and too low, depending on who's asking. Your stomach growls. The bread from earlier was theoretical. You eye a basket of small apples, sour and unevenly shaped, but they glisten in the morning light like they might contain vitamins. You reach for one, but the merchant, a woman with arms like seasoned firewood, gives you a look that translates as, "That apple is 3 months of rent." You withdraw. Politely. This village doesn't mint its own coins. Instead, You're bartering. You have, let's see, some dried fish in a waxed linen wrap, a small carved bone comb, and 2 eggs, one of which is questionably warm. You might be able to trade for something useful, like a beeswax candle, or something delightful, like a baked fig tart from the miller's wife, who's known for her scandalous use of cinnamon. You wander past the tanner's booth. The smell hits you like a very specific betrayal. The hides are stretched taut over wooden frames, flies humming lazily in the summer air. The tanner nods at you, face unreadable beneath layers of grime and quiet personal history. Near the far end of the market, children play a game involving sticks, stones, and entirely too much yelling. One child wears half a bird mask, pretending to be death. His friends run away screaming, and one trips over a pig. Life continues. Here's your historical fact for this chapter. Around this time, the statute of laborers hasn't yet happened. That comes after the Black Death. For now, labor is plentiful and poorly paid. If you can work, you work. If you can't, well, maybe someone gives you soup. Maybe. You finally spot old Mags. She's seated under an awning woven from faded sails, mortar and pestle in hand, grinding something that smells like both salvation and eye-watering root extract. Her face is all folds and sharp eyes, like a very wise raisin. She looks up. "New one, are you?" she says. You nod. Because what else is there to do? She gestures for you to sit, offers you a sprig of something greenish and hopeful. "Chew," she says. "It'll keep your stomach from staging a rebellion." You do. It's bitter. Your mouth curls like a disappointed scroll. While you sit, she tells you stories. Of villagers swallowed by bogs, of a cat that may have been a ghost, of a night when the moon bled red and no bread would rise. You're not sure if these are warnings or small talk. A weird cultural tidbit slips in. Apparently, to bless a field, some folks bury a toad in a sock at its edge. No one's quite sure why, but the sock is important. You watch the people bustle, barter, and brag. Everyone seems tired in a way that's older than sleep. Historians argue about how much freedom villagers had to move or change jobs. Some say they were bound to the manor like boots to mud. Others suggest a little movement was tolerated, as long as taxes kept flowing uphill. Either way, you're here for now. You thank old Mags. She gives you a root bundle in exchange for the egg. The warm one. She winks. Fertile eggs have more magic, she says, absolutely unhelpfully. As the sun climbs, you begin walking back toward your thatched lair. The goose is still watching. You're starting to feel it. The rhythm of the place. The slow churn of effort and breath and weather. Your stomach is less furious. Your cloak smells faintly of time. And there's a splinter in your finger that somehow feels like progress. You're doing just fine, for now. You walk along a narrow path bordered by hedgerows and lazy chickens. The road is, generously, firm. Less generously, it's a suggestion of a road. more mud than dirt. It squelches beneath your feet like it's trying to start a conversation. Every step pulls slightly, like the earth is possessive. You step over a wheel rut the size of a philosophical crisis and catch the scent of onions. Somewhere, someone is either cooking or crying. In the distance, the church bell rings. Once, then twice. The sound echoes through the trees like a reminder. Not a request, just a reminder. It's always watching. You pause, watching a flock of geese march across the road like they pay rent. One of them honks with the energy of a retired nobleman. They pass, barely acknowledging you. You're headed toward the manor. Not because you want to, but because you live under the feudal system. And in this system, there is one key concept: you owe someone something. Always. Grain, labor, chickens, or just a general sense of humility. Today, you owe the reeve, the Lord's appointed tax collector, a record of your work this week. Which is tricky, since you've mostly been walking around with herbs and hissing at geese. Still, you make your way to the manor courtyard, where a small crowd has gathered. Some look nervous. One holds a live duck like it's a hostage negotiation. Another just stares up at the clouds, possibly reconsidering reincarnation. The reeve stands tall, with the air of someone who has never had to chase their own hat. He wears a surcoat with faded embroidery. His boots are cleaner than yours, which seems rude. He's checking names and tithes. You're next. You step forward, holding out the root bundle you got from old Mags and mumbling something about helping with seasonal wellness of the populace. He raises an eyebrow. You quickly add that you also collected kindling and helped a neighbor catch her runaway goat. This part is technically true. You shouted "Stop that goat" once. He accepts the root bundle. Mostly because he's not quite sure what it is. You're marked useful. Barely. Here's your historical fact: in medieval England, serfs were technically not slaves, but they were bound to the land. They had to give part of their produce, or labor, to the lord in exchange for protection, land access, and the vague promise that their house wouldn't be set on fire by bandits. Most didn't leave the village their entire lives. Social mobility moved about as quickly as tree sap in January. Behind the reeve, the manor house looms. It's not the castle. That's for kings and people with vaults. This is more like a fancy bar with opinions. Stone lower walls. Timber upper levels. A thatched roof trimmed with decorative woodwork that probably makes the chickens feel underdressed. You're not allowed inside. Not unless summoned. Which you aren't. Yet. A small boy throws a rock at a crow. The crow dodges. The rock hits a passing donkey, which begins braying like it's giving a TED talk. The reeve doesn't flinch. He's seen things. You make your exit. As you walk back, you pass the village alewife. She's out front of her low-beamed house, hammering a sign into the ground that reads simply, "Ale's ready." No marketing department. No fancy logo. Just a woman with a barrel and a dream. She nods at you, then ladles a wooden mug of dark liquid and holds it out. You trade the bone comb for it. She squints, then shrugs. Fair enough. The ale is strong. Not refined, not fruity. Just committed. You sit nearby, savoring it. A group of men argue over whether pigs dream. One insists they do. Another says pigs can see ghosts. No one disagrees. Why risk it? Here's your obscure tidbit. Some villagers believe sneezing too loud can invite the devil. That's why people say bless you to literally ward off evil. One sneeze? Fine. 2 sneezes? You're pushing it. 3? Better light a candle and apologize to the nearest holy object. From the corner of your eye, you spot the church again. Its stone bell tower rises like a finger wagging from God. The bell rings again, this time marking none, the mid-afternoon prayer. Few people stop what they're doing. Life is prayer, after all. Scholars still argue how strictly villagers followed the church's daily hours. Some say devotion ruled every moment. Others suggest the peasants simply nodded and kept threshing. You drain the last of your ale, now pleasantly warm inside, and begin the long way home. You're not sure who you're becoming here, but you suspect it's someone with strong calves and better bargaining skills. You wake the next morning to the sound of wheels crunching on gravel. Not just any wheels. Wooden ones, uneven and complaining, pulled by a mule that sounds older than time. You peek out the doorway and see it, the peddler's cart. It's a traveling miracle. A gaudy wooden cart painted in once vivid blues and reds, now faded like forgotten gossip. Tied with ribbons, bells, and the occasional chicken feather, it creaks into town like it's carrying buried secrets, and maybe socks. Children gather, wide-eyed. Adults follow, less wide-eyed but just as eager. The peddler arrives once a month. Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on plague, bandits, or existential crises. You pull on your cloak, still smelling faintly of Mag's herbs, and head to the village green. The peddler is tall, lean, wrapped in layers of cloth that might be fashion or just confusion. He grins like someone who knows things he shouldn't. "Good people," he calls, arms spread wide. "I bring wonders." He does not bring wonders. He brings pins, combs, spices, and ribbons that have seen better days. But here, even a pinch of cinnamon is a story. You browse the cart. A tin whistle, some glass beads, a small mirror, luxuries. The mirror shows your face, which feels like a betrayal. You look like someone who's wrestled too many sheep and lost most of those matches. You barter with the last of your dried fish for a length of blue ribbon. Not because you need it. Because it feels like something a version of you might wear someday. A woman next to you examines a tiny jar of nutmeg like it might grant wishes. Here's your historical fact for the hour. Peddlers were essential in the Middle Ages. They brought goods from town to town, sometimes sanctioned, sometimes not. They also spread news, rumors, and occasionally the flu. But who's counting? You linger as the peddler tells stories of cities with stone walls so wide a cart could ride atop them, of a sea where the water is warmer than tea, of coins the size of plates. His accent shifts mid-sentence. His eyes never stop scanning. You suspect he's half performer, half con artist, and one-third inventor of fractions. But the crowd loves him. Your favorite moment? When he produces a tiny puppet stage and reenacts the story of St. George and the dragon using spoons. The dragon is a fork. No one questions it. Nearby, old Mags watches silently, sipping something from a flask shaped like a boot. Here's your obscure tidbit. Some peddlers claim to carry thieves' vinaigrette concoction said to protect against plague, heartbreak, and bad investments. It's mostly wine with herbs, but branding is everything. You trade 2 buttons from your tunic for a small pouch of dried lavender. You're not sure what to do with it yet, but it smells like decisions you haven't made. The peddler begins to pack up, the mule sighing dramatically. Someone starts playing a fiddle. Someone else dances like a startled goat. Historians debate whether peddlers were welcomed or merely tolerated. They brought novelty, yes, but also new prices, new ideas, and occasionally, new problems. Not everyone wants their world expanded when they're still trying to fix the roof. As he leaves, the peddler tosses a small wooden toy to the nearest child, waves with one gloved hand, and disappears into the woods like a plot device. The cart vanishes slowly, like a dream you weren't done having. You return home with your ribbon, your lavender, and a slightly wider sense of the world. Your cottage feels both smaller and sweeter than before. And that's the trick of it, isn't it? The world hasn't changed. But you have. The sun rose slowly and shyly this morning. Pale light filters through your thatch like a half-hearted apology. You stretch. Your bones protest like an old council meeting, each one with something to say. You ignore them and start the fire. Lighting a hearth without matches is either a beautiful ritual or a slow humiliation. Today it's the second kind. The flint sparks lazily, like it's on holiday. Eventually, smoke rises. You feed the fire dry twigs, whisper soft bribes, and pretend you know what you're doing. You set a pot of barley porridge over the flame. It's yesterday's water and this morning's optimism. The porridge does not cooperate. It bubbles suspiciously and clings to the spoon like it has abandonment issues. Outside, a distant shout cracks the air. You pause, spoon mid-stir. Then another shout. You open the door. A sheep runs past. Not trotting. Not waddling. Full sprint. Behind it, Thomas. Barefoot, half-dressed, clutching a rope and swearing creatively in early Middle English. His hair sticks out in directions previously undocumented. Catch it, he yells. You do not catch it. You try. You really do. But the sheep is fast, possibly aerodynamic, and you are holding a spoon. By the time the sheep vanishes into the hedgerow, Thomas is doubled over, wheezing and laughing. Third time this month, he pants. I swear she's possessed. You offer him a sip of water from your bucket. He accepts, like someone grateful not to be mocked. This is life here. Small chaos, gentle absurdity, and slightly burned porridge waiting inside. Your historical fact for this gentle disaster: sheep were central to medieval English life. Their wool was a backbone of the economy, and their droppings often doubled as both fuel and fertilizer. That's right. Sheep powered the economy in more ways than one. They were fluffy little power plants. You scrape the porridge from the pot. It's technically edible. You eat with the satisfaction of someone who didn't chase a sheep and lose. Just as you settle into a seated position on your stool, which still wobbles like it wants a career change, you hear a knock. Not a soft one. A something is happening knock. You open the door to find Emma. Short, fast-talking, and always slightly windblown, even indoors. She points toward the woods. Gathering day, she says. We need nettles, thyme, and those weird mushrooms Mags likes. You nod. You're in. You gather your bag, your cloak, and the stick you've optimistically been calling a walking staff. Into the woods you go. The path is narrow, bordered by ferns and secrets. Birdsong fills the air. A squirrel scolds you from a branch, possibly about fashion. Emma leads the way, pointing out useful plants. That's wood sorrel. Eat too much, and you'll see stars. You jot that down in the notepad of your mind. She picks nettles with skillful fingers. You hesitate, then follow. Your hands immediately regret this. They sting. You pretend they don't. You'll toughen up, she says. Or die. Either way, you'll stop complaining. You like Emma. Here's your obscure tidbit. In some villages, nettle cloth was woven as a cheaper alternative to linen. Yes, that same stingy plant was used for clothing. And no one enjoyed it. But it was warm, durable, and a bold-fashioned statement. If your statement was "I'm itchy but frugal," you find mushrooms under an old oak. Emma pauses. These ones? You shrug. They're round, white, and smell like forest floor. Which is either right or deeply wrong. Historians still debate how much botanical knowledge medieval villagers really had. Some argue they were experts, others suggest they just kept eating things until someone said don't. You return to the village with a bag full of leaves, your hands still tingling, and a growing suspicion that you might actually be getting the hang of this life. Maybe. You pass Thomas again. The sheep is back. It's chewing his sock. It rains at noon. Without warning, without clouds, like the sky suddenly remembered it had a to-do list. You're outside, of course. The rain is cold, sharp, and unimpressed with your cloak. It drips down your back and into your boots, pooling in that special way that makes every step sound like betrayal. You take shelter under the overhang of the bakehouse, where the air smells of yeast, soot, and decisions made too early in the morning. Beside you, two older villagers argue about whether this rain is a sign. Last time it rained like this, "The mill flooded," says one. "That wasn't the rain, that was your son's dam," says the other. "He built it with hope and one boot." They both nod, satisfied. You peek out toward the churchyard. The bell doesn't ring. The priest must be napping or reinterpreting theology. The churchyard, though, is always worth visiting. You head there slowly, dodging puddles the size of moral dilemmas. The graveyard is quiet, except for the soft sound of water dripping from the chapel eaves and the occasional squawk of a raven doing absolutely nothing helpful. You stroll among tilted stones. Names worn down, dates faded, some markers just hunks of wood half-eaten by time. One marker catches your eye. A carving of a snail. You tilt your head. Old Mags walks up behind you. "That's for Elias," she says. "Loved snails. Raised them. Ate them. Wrote poems to them." You nod, very slowly. She squints at the clouds. "Rain's good for the turnips. Bad for the roof. You check yours? You haven't." She wanders off, muttering about mold spirits. You linger. "Here's your historical fact. Most medieval villages had a parish church at their center. Not just for worship, but for meetings, storage, baptisms, taxes, announcements, and the occasional dramatic exorcism. Church bells marked the rhythm of village life, morning, midday, evening. Like a very holy Fitbit. You sit on a stone bench. A slug crawls across the edge, oblivious. It seems wise. The rain slows. You think about everything you've done since waking in this world. You've burned porridge, failed to catch a sheep, touched a suspicious mushroom, and made friends with someone who likes stinging plants. You've watched a toy dragon made from a fork, and you've bartered a ribbon in a world where mirrors are rare and sheep are common criminals. Not bad. Here's your obscure tidbit. Some villagers believed worms in graveyards could sing. Not audibly, but spiritually. A sign that the dead were at peace. Or possibly bored. You walk back through the village slowly. Rain clings to the eaves, pools and buckets, turns the road into pudding. Historians still argue whether the medieval mind saw the weather as divine punishment, atmospheric coincidence, or just one more thing to blame on the neighbors. Likely a combination of all three. You arrive home to find your roof leaking, exactly where Mags said it would. A single drop lands on your nose. You sigh. You fetch straw and clay, patch the hole, and sit by the hearth as the wind softens. There's barley left. The good kind this time. You're not entirely dry, not entirely warm, but you are. Here. You stir the pot. You hear the sheep again. And this time, you think you hear it laugh. The sun dips slower now, brushing the tops of trees with orange, as if trying to warm them before bedtime. You step outside your cottage and feel the first real chill of evening sneak under your cloak. It whispers against your neck like a secret you didn't ask for. Tonight, there's a feast. Not for you, of course. Not at first. It's the harvest festival, a yearly excuse for the villagers to put down their tools, pretend food is endless, and act like the winter isn't coming to eat their toes. But if you hang around long enough, you'll get a bowl of something hot and a seat near the fire. Or a splintered bench. Whichever comes first. You follow the trail of lanterns toward the village green. Candlelight flickers and hollowed turnips, carved into faces that range from cheerful to what nightmare made you this way? Children run between them, cloaks flying behind like wings. Or capes. Or laundry. The smell hits you before the sound does. Stew, roasting meat, damp wool, and the fainting of wet hay. Then the music. A single fiddle saws out a tune like it's trying to argue with gravity. A drum joins in, badly, then catches a rhythm and stops apologizing. You find a place near the edge, by a bale of hay that may or may not be absorbing half the night's soup spills. Emma waves you over. She's wearing a wreath of herbs in her hair and smells like thyme, rosemary, and mild defiance. You made it, she says, offering you a cup of cider. You sip. It's strong. It has opinions. It might also remove pain. The feast is humble but comforting. Bread, beans, a stew full of things you mostly recognize. A pie that might be apple, might be turnip. You eat it anyway. Twice. A boy stands on the barrel and begins to sing. It's a local ballad about a knight, a goose, and a broken ladder. None of it rhymes, but everyone claps. He bows so deeply he falls off the barrel. Here's your historical fact: feasts weren't just for nobles. Village festivals, especially post-harvest, were a real thing. They marked the turning of the agricultural year. Even peasants needed a break. Not much of one, but enough to dance badly and pretend cider is a health tonic. A fire roars in the center of the green, and shadows stretch like lazy dancers. People sway to the music. Some hum. One man begins reciting poetry to his dog, who looks unimpressed. Old Mags arrives late. She places something wrapped in leaves onto the coals. It hisses, then smells like honey and herbs. She smiles, but says nothing. Probably a spell. Or a snack. Here's your obscure tidbit. Some medieval villages had a designated lord of misrule during festivals, a peasant chosen to mock the real lord. Just for the night. It was fun until someone took it seriously. Tonight, no one's mocking anyone. Except maybe the fiddler, who drops his bow and declares it intentional. Scholars argue whether these festivals were forms of religious devotion, early theater, or just necessary emotional release. Likely all three, plus free bread. You lean back. Your belly is full. Your head is fuzzy. The fire cracks. The music stumbles along, and the stars peek out from behind wool-thick clouds. You start to believe that you could live like this. Maybe you already do. Just as you're drifting into cider-fueled contentment, the sheep trots past, wearing the wreath from Emma's head. You're not even surprised anymore. It's morning again. Your head feels like someone whispered bees into your ears overnight. Cider has consequences. You sit up slowly, cradle your mug of leftover barley water, and give the ceiling a long, suspicious look. The rooster doesn't crow today. Possibly lost a bet. You dress. You splash your face. You chew a sprig of something from your windowsill. You hope it was edible. There's commotion near the road. 3 travelers. Not villagers. Clean boots, worn cloaks, wide eyes. Pilgrims. They carry staffs, pouches, and that distinct air of people who've heard too many sermons and now want proof. One has a seashell pinned to his chest, symbol of the Camino. Another wears a crude cross, carved from driftwood. They approach slowly, with the polite uncertainty of people unsure if this village has bedbugs or blessings. You watch from a distance. Then old Mags nods at you. You're going with them, she says. You blink. You were not consulted. She hands you a pouch. Inside, dried herbs, a flint, and a strip of linen. Just past the mill, she says. That spring. The one that smells like eggs. They're headed that way. The sulfur spring. You've heard of it. Healing waters, they say. Or cursed. Or just smelly. No one agrees. You join the group, and they nod. No names are exchanged. Just the silent pact that walking is easier than explaining. You pass the mill. Its wheel churns in lazy circles, creaking like an old gossip. The air smells of flour, damp wood, and ambition. Beyond the mill, the road narrows. Trees leaning close. A squirrel drops a nut directly onto your shoulder. You accept it as a blessing. The spring appears as a shallow pool, bubbling faintly, steaming slightly. The smell arrives second. Not unpleasant. Just ancient. The lead pilgrim drops to his knees. He prays. The second one hums. The third just sticks a toe in and winces. Here's your historical fact. Pilgrimages were a massive part of medieval life. People traveled miles, hundreds of miles, on foot to visit shrines, springs, or relics. Some went for healing. Others for forgiveness. A few just needed to escape their taxes. The church encouraged it. And the inns profited. You crouch, watching the water ripple like it remembers stories. The second pilgrim removes a pouch and offers you something. A carved token. Worn, wooden, round. It shows a tree with roots. For protection, she says. You nod, tuck it into your belt. Protection from what isn't specified. Probably everything. Emma appears, somehow. She hands you a flask. Mag's sent nettle tea, she says. For the pilgrims. You pass it around. They drink. Politely. Faces contort. They pretend it's delicious. Here's your obscure tidbit. Some travelers believed that carrying a dried toad, yes, a literal mummified toad, would protect them from thieves. Why? Because thieves, like most people, avoid those carrying dead amphibians. The walk back is quiet. Birds follow. Clouds drift. Your boots squish slightly. Historians aren't sure how often villagers truly left their homes for journeys like this. Some say it was rare. Others believe people traveled more than we assume, on foot, by cart, through mud and miracle. You return to the village. The pilgrims stay behind, murmuring thanks, then setting off down the next path. You watch until they disappear beyond the bend. Back home, you place the token on your shelf, next to the lavender, next to the bone spoon, next to your slowly growing collection of unlikely evidence that this life, as strange as it is, might just be real. This morning begins not with a rooster, nor rain, nor runaway sheep, but with a summons. Not dramatic, just a note, delivered by a barefoot boy who looks extremely pleased to be running errands for the manorial court. "Your name's on the list," he says, panting, handing you a folded parchment that smells faintly of veal. The manorial court, held monthly, presided over by the Lord Steward in the great barn, or occasionally under the largest oak tree if the weather's feeling smug. You haven't done anything wrong, as far as you know. Then again, you did take a shortcut through Thomas's barley field yesterday. And you may have borrowed a handful of green onions from the communal plot. And the sheep thing. You brush your cloak, adjust your tunic, and try to look like a person innocent of everything. The court is already gathering. Villagers sit on overturned buckets, low benches, or just the ground. A chicken perches confidently on the judge's stool. The steward arrives. Big hat, bigger attitude. He clears his throat like he's about to audition for an opera. Cases begin. One man accuses his neighbor of letting pigs root too close to his fence. Another complains about a stolen ladle. No, his ladle, not the other one, the good one. A woman insists someone's ghost has been walking through her potatoes. You're called. Trampling barley, the steward says flatly. Witnessed by Agnes the weaver. You glance over. Agnes nods once, like a disappointed aunt. You're given the chance to explain. You choose honesty, which in medieval court is either refreshing or suspicious. I was lost, you say. Looking for mushrooms. A murmur of approval. Mushrooms are important. The steward squints, then finds you a half-day's labor mending a fence. Reasonable. You bow slightly and return to your seat. Here's your historical fact. The manorial court was the backbone of local justice in feudal England. It handled everything from land disputes to petty crimes to chicken theft. The lord, or his steward, presided, but the villagers themselves played roles as jurors or witnesses. It was more community management than courtroom drama, unless the duck was involved. Because yes, the duck. Midway through the court session, a duck waddles into the barn, hops onto the steward's table, and sits on a pile of parchment. No one stops it. It's Harold's duck, and Harold claims it has a keen sense for liars. The steward lets the duck stay. One woman stares at the duck nervously throughout her case about missing firewood. The duck quacks once. She changes her story. The court nods. Here's your obscure tidbit. There's at least one recorded case from the 1300s of an animal, specifically a pig, being put on trial. It had bitten someone, and the villagers, caught between law and superstition, tried it. The pig lost. Which is probably why ducks are careful now. By afternoon, the court is done. The steward tips his hat. The villagers scatter. You spend the rest of the day mending a fence. Agnes walks by, offers you a small apple, and mutters, "Good effort." It feels like a victory. Later, you sit by the well, sipping cool water and listening to the breeze. The duck walks by. You nod at it. It does not nod back. But you feel acknowledged. Scholars still debate whether medieval villagers enjoyed these public court gatherings or dreaded them. Evidence suggests a little of both. Like staff meetings. Or family dinners. Evening sets in, slow and sweet. Lanterns flicker. Someone sings in the distance, off-key, but confidently. You sit by the fire that night, watching the sparks rise and vanish. You think about barley, and ducks, and justice. And your half-day penalty doesn't seem so bad. The first frost comes quietly. You wake to a cold so delicate it seems polite, until it slips under your blanket like a whisper from a ghost who means well but has cold feet. Your breath curls in the air. The windowsill glistens with a thin crust of ice. You reach for your cloak, now stiff with the night, and move carefully to the hearth. There's no fire yet. Just yesterday's ashes, soft and gray like a nap that went too far. You coax new flames from embers, add wood with care, and sit as warmth slowly returns to the world. Outside, the village looks transformed. Thatched roofs sparkle. The paths are edged with frost. Even the mud has taken a break. The fields lie still, empty, resting. The labor of harvest has passed, and now the land waits. And so do you. No sheep run by. No rooster complains. Just the creak of branches, the slow crackle of wood, and your own breath. You pull the lavender pouch from your shelf and crush it lightly. The scent floats upward, sharp, clean, familiar. You think of the peddler's cart, of the stories, of the puppet dragon made from a fork. You unwrap the root bundle from Mag's. Still potent, still confusing. You light a beeswax candle. A gift from the miller's wife, in exchange for your help turning the wheel when the axle frows. You'd forgotten how heavy grain could be. Each object has a memory. The ribbon from the market day, now woven into your window cloth. The token from the pilgrim, hanging by the door. Even the wooden spoon. The one that touched burned porridge in worse decisions. Here's your final historical fact. Most people in the medieval world didn't write journals. They didn't leave memoirs or personal essays. Their lives were recorded in the margins, court fines, land records, church rolls. But every object you held today would have told a story, if you knew how to listen. You wrap your cloak tighter. Outside, smoke curls from neighboring chimneys. Someone coughs. Someone laughs. Someone is chopping wood too enthusiastically for dawn. Winter will be hard, but not impossible. You've learned to patch your roof, You know which mushrooms not to eat. You've made friends. Or at least allies. Even Harold's duck trusts you now. Historians debate whether the Dark Ages were truly dark. Some argue for collapse. Others point to resilience. Villages like this one. People like you. Here's your obscure final tidbit. Some villagers believed winter breath could freeze a line inside the chest. That's why you always told the truth before the solstice. Just in case. Now, the world narrows. The fire glows. You lie back on your straw bed. It's still uneven. Still stubborn. But it's yours. The thatch above you sways gently in the breeze. You hear the wind hum through the cracks like it's singing a lullaby older than words. The candle flickers. Once. Twice. And slowly, the room grows soft and golden. Let yourself settle now. Let your breathing match the rhythm of the wind outside the distant window. Imagine the air in your lungs is like mist rising from that frosty morning field, slow, calm, and warm where it matters most. Let your limbs relax. Let the small aches of a medieval day melt into the blanket wrapped around you now. You've walked the village paths, felt the dirt roads under your feet. Listen to the fire crackle and the owl call. You've gathered herbs, mended fences, out-negotiated a goose. You've done enough. Now, listen to the silence between sounds. The pause between raindrops. The hush behind the wind. This is the stillness the villagers once heard, once trusted. When the candles burned low and sleep curled like smoke beneath the beams. The world outside fades. The stories drift into the dark. And in the quiet of this moment, between one century and the next, you close your eyes.